the demographic shift, the wealthy, the older generation, the gerontocracy, the ones in power that have the wealth, they're in the halls of power. They are going to go away. That's just how life works. We all go away at some point. Well, they'll be gone. The younger generations that know nothing other than Bitcoin or will know nothing but Bitcoin, that's this event where we cross that event horizon where there is no going back. And it's frustrating, it's annoying because we see it now today, and we wish everyone saw it now today. Going back to earlier, we don't want people to touch the stove. We don't have to go through this pain, but we're kind of going to have to go through this. It's just like humanity, these turnings. It's just life. So get prepared in the way that the boys were saying, what makes you comfortable, what you can sleep at night, weather this time period. And if it happens sooner, great. But it's going to take a little bit. It's not going to just happen overnight, and prepare accordingly.
And I think there's another amazing point that Shore kind of already brought up, and Skylar also in the comments brought up amazingly, where he said, I got myself out of all the debt. I maintain a fiat emergency fund and a DCA. And with that setup, which is a very simple setup, it's like it's not complicated to not have debt. It's not complicated to have some fiat emergency cash, and then just DCA every week, month, day, whatever makes sense for your setup. Like, that's the simplest setup you could possibly have. And it's also one of the most powerful setups that you could possibly have. And when I talk to people, when people come up to me in DMs or even in conferences and tell me like, oh, I'm stressed out about the price, I always ask, do you have debt? And more often than not, the answer is yes. And I'm like, yeah, I would also be stressed out about the price if there is a point where I can get margin called. And then they're like, oh, but I want to do the sailor strategy. I'm like, you're not doing the sailor strategy. Sailor cannot get margin called. You can go at margin called. Sailor can't. Sailor is fine with a $5,000, $10,000 Bitcoin price. He just like gobbles up those Bitcoin cheaply. But like you will get margin called, and then Bitcoin has a hockey stick moment to 300K, and you sold all your Bitcoin because you had to at like 10K because you got liquidated. And so I think I would always be very cautious with any type of margin call, loaning, borrowing against your Bitcoin. Like, be very sure you can handle that stuff, because having a fiat emergency fund, having the DCA and no debt is a very powerful, very nice strategy that can't really be beaten by a lot of other strategies out there. Like, why would you go ahead and do that and go into debt? I don't know if you guys have any opinions on like borrowing against Bitcoin and debt and all of those things, but I'm very clear on it's probably a bad idea.
Well, I saw a comment in my YouTube channel about 2 weeks ago now, and it was basically a guy, he said he'd been buying Bitcoin since 2017. And kind of what he said, it wasn't a lengthy comment, but I got the message. And basically what he said is, for the last 9 years, he's taken any money that he didn't need, he didn't need in the short term, he wasn't going to buy anything else with, and put that into Bitcoin. And he said he hasn't had one stressful day in his life. And that's what it is. It's people who tried to do too much, who are desperate, who think they need this amount of Bitcoin, and they start making silly or stupid decisions to try to chase that quicker. And that's how people get burned. That's how people lose. But if you just look at Bitcoin as a savings technology, and you take any money that you don't need within the next 6 months to a year, and you buy Bitcoin with that consistently at every price, how could you have a bad day? Especially when you zoom out 9 years and look at what the chart's done through that time. Then you don't get caught up price watching, chasing the price, losing sleep over debt that's coming due. I think the simplest strategy is the best strategy in Bitcoin. And that's what a lot of people miss, because there's all these different channels promoting this fancy technique and this crypto coin and this different strategy. And it's just like, take whatever value you have that you aren't going to use, put it in Bitcoin and sleep. Like, it's not that complicated. It's really not.
I think there could be a place for debt in people's portfolio, but it's not for me to say. It's personal finance, and it does add additional risk. And if you can't handle that, that's going to become a problem for you. It's basically that simple. The problem is most people don't realize what is too much stress for them. Yeah. And they don't realize what it feels like to have debt, or the other thing there too, right, is with that example you had, Robin, where somebody had Bitcoin and debt, they now start looking at the Bitcoin as a way to save themselves from the feelings that the debt created. So now it's not just about Bitcoin and maybe what drew them in or what builds conviction for them of being part of the revolution, part of the alternate money network. It's now, well, this debt is feeling like it's boxing me in a little bit. I have to sell this Bitcoin to get out of this situation I'm in. It's now that is what the option is for them, which is not a good place to be in. So I don't know. For me, like, yeah, it's not my place to tell anybody what to do. But personally, I would never borrow more than 10% worth of my stack. And if it was secured by the asset itself, I would start with an LTV of 30% or less. And so that is incredibly conservative compared to other people. And I would not even think for an instance that I am replicating what Saylor is doing, because he has no margin callable debt on his balance sheet. All of the debt they have is convertible into equity, and they have equity with a liability attached to it in the shape of their preferred instruments. So it's not even debt in a technical sense. And it's a completely different animal. And people are trying and pretending that they can do that, but it is make believe and pretend. It's a completely different story at a personal level if you're taking on especially a securitized debt than what Saylor's doing.
Yeah.
What are you guys thinking actually about strategy? Because I think as we speak right now, there is the strategy world going on. I'm not sure, is it today or tomorrow? I think I could be wrong, but I think it's today.
I think it's today.
I think also it's today. What do you guys think about strategy? Actually, I think I've never talked with any. I think with Joe I've talked about strategy briefly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they will become a Bitcoin bank. I know Saylor said like, oh, we're not going to be that. We don't want to be that. But I mean, it's just at some point, I think it's going to become, you're almost stupid if you don't.
You don't tell your enemies. Your game plan.
Exactly. It's the art of war. I mean, it's a Sun Tzu art of war stuff. I mean, you don't. Game theory does.
What do you define as Bitcoin bank?
Just a place where people can do things like this, where they can go lend against their Bitcoin, do things that you're doing in a regular bank in essence. And then I saw some people in the chat talking about ETFs, paper Bitcoin, things of that nature. And so I think strategy will eventually become that. The far off 6102 conspiracy side is that, the US could just say, hey, guess what, Saylor? Those are our coins now. And he's a US company. And so until he's not a US company, they have, he's probably going to play their game, just like Brian Armstrong said with Coinbase. Like 5 years ago, he was like, hey guys, just FYI, like put yourself in self-custody, which is the thing that someone did say in the chat that roots out all of the paper stuff. The more Bitcoin that's in self-custody, the less these games can be played. And so you have a couple things going on here. The strategy part is, could that happen? Yes. And so that's like one of these tail risks. These are things you have to think through and think about. I think strategy will become probably the wealthiest company in the world, or right up there, the top couple, depending on what NVIDIA or, Tesla, what's going on there maybe. But, he's going to do that. But then, outside of that, I forgot where I was going with it now. I don't even know where I was going with that. But anyway, strategy. Sorry, say it again.
I just said that happens to me on a daily basis.
Oh yeah. Anyway, the bank. I think he's going to go that direction with it, and he's going to be, Hal Finney talked about this. That was one of the other things I was going to bring up too, right? Hal Finney talked about this, and we're in a world where I know what I was going to say. So you have this world where you can't have capitalism without capital. Right now, it's a debt-based system, so you don't have capitalism. And I know I sound like a communist here, like, oh, we haven't tried communism the right way before. Well, unfortunately, you can't do communism with human beings. You could do it with maybe AI or maybe robots because they're all the same, theoretically or technically speaking or whatever. But capitalism is the best system we found for human beings. But you cannot have capitalism built on top of a faulty currency, a faulty foundation. And that's what we have. And I've talked to so many people that are like MBAs or whatever, and they're like, well, I mean, inflation is a part of capitalism and like the dollar and all this stuff. But what we miss, obviously, is the input of the system, the dollar, the accounting mechanism is broken. And so everyone goes to school or is in school, government-run schools, and they're not taught, they never ask the first question, what is money? And what are we using to account for all of these things we're learning in school? And they just go to step 1 or step 2, and they never ask the first question. And so we have an economic system built on a faulty foundation. So of course it's going to collapse and then just dissolve into the quicksand. And everyone looks around and it's like, well, we need Mondami. We need a socialist. We need, that's natural. Of course that would happen. Like that, you're dumb to think that wouldn't happen. And so once you have a bedrock of sound money, which we've seen gold and silver over the course of thousands of years, we've had civilizations run on sound money. Again, they're more local. It's hard you can't have a global economy in physical coins, as GG pointed out years ago. You have a ledger or physical coins. So you're going to have this world where if you want a global economy. So some might say, hey, Brandon, I don't want a local economy. Okay, well then you go that way. We're going to have a local or a global economy. So we need a ledger that can't be effed with, and that's only Bitcoin. Bitcoin's the only obvious, credible answer to any of that. So this is where AI, going back full circle, will choose these things, etc. I'm going in many different directions. The other thing I want to say, though, really quick, is that the beauty of Bitcoin is the trade is the settlement, is the finality. Again, this goes back to the global ledger. If you're going to have a global ledger, you have to have finality. Otherwise, the in between there, when I purchase it to when when the transaction is final, that's where all the funny games happen. That's where all the shenanigans happen, the 3% chargebacks and the middlemen, the trusting, and all the paper claims and the ETF, whatever, the shenanigans, the banks, the credit cards. So because Bitcoin, you can play funny games on Bitcoin for a little bit. FTX proved that. There's going to be people doing that. But my big prediction over this next 10 years as things happen, the black swans we're going to see, I think, will be some nation states going down, some banks going down because they play funny games with Bitcoin. And the beauty of Bitcoin that makes it different than the gold and silver is the gold and silver is physical. So you don't know how many coins are in the world and you can't audit it. It's impossible to audit. Who are you going to trust to audit all the coins in the world? Bitcoin is not that. It's the opposite. We can all audit it with our node, and anyone's running every 10 minutes. So the funny games can be played for a little bit, but eventually you F around and you find out. You will get found out. The tide goes out and these shenanigans will end. And that's where, coming full circle with all this, and I'll land the plane, is you don't change Bitcoin, Bitcoin changes you. Society keeps learning, I can't keep effing with things. I have to conform to this protocol. Yeah. End of story.
Yeah, there's money to be made in the shenanigans that you described right now on top of Bitcoin, paper derivatives and whatnot. But there's risk involved in all of the people holding those claims that don't amount to anything. And as we've seen, Bitcoin is that perfectly auditable ledger, and the games get found out. And those people will be left holding the bag. And then the next time it comes around, they say, you know what? I'm just going to hold Bitcoin because this is too risky. Look at all the people that blew up last time doing these same games. And then it'll get smaller and smaller, the group that are willing to play that incredibly risky game. And so it all comes back. All roads lead to spot Bitcoin.
That's what I was going to say when we were still talking about the AI stuff too, is that with the internet being a protocol, I think that the world wasn't the same state that it's in right now when the internet came out. People weren't as concerned. There was no real risk of rug. People didn't care. They still don't care about privacy. But it's different when you have your livelihood and everything that you've worked for over your life. When that starts to slip away from you, people act a little bit differently. And I think that we've kind of mentioned the boomers have the wealth right now, which is going to be passed down to Gen X, millennials. And the Gen X and millennials, I think, feel a lot differently than the baby boomers and the generation before them about, agency, about sovereignty, about taking responsibility for what you own and not trusting with somebody else. And so I think that there's going to be a lot of different attempts to try to capture Bitcoin, but ultimately they're all going to fail because of that. And I think we have a generation here, I'm speaking as a millennial, who gives a shit about that stuff. And I don't think that my parents ever did give a shit about that stuff. Not because they're a different person than me, but because they were raised in a different environment than I was. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that the baby boomers had radio, TV, and the newspaper for their information. We have unlimited access to all information except the Epstein files. But for the most part, we have access to everything. And anybody who's willing to spend a couple hours looking into things, you can change your mind pretty quickly. And I think that there's a lot of people in this demographic who are willing to do that. And we're going to be the ones who have the wealth in a decade or two from now. And so that's why it's not a rush for me, because I know what's coming at the end of this.
Mm-hmm.
Just casually dropping the Epstein thing.
He set that up.
Well, I mean, even that though, like the internet that we see now, because it's been captured, is what, like 2% of what's actually out there on the deep dark web, as they call it. But like, what are we able to see? Even like 2% of it? That's the Epstein files, just kind of a microcosm of the reality, like the window that have been able to see, and our parents was like this before we got here. So it's widening. I guess that's the point. The window's widening.
Yeah,
And it is great. Sorry, Brent. I think it's crazy to think about the possibilities with that. And I love the point that Forrest made. We do see with the internet that you have the closed sourced apps that kind of win over most of the mainstream, but you always have the possibility to go down yourself, and you can still use the open source things. And the same with Bitcoin. Even in a world where most of the Bitcoin are paper Bitcoin, you can go down to self-custody and do it yourself. And I think this is the main thing that I'm trying to get in. I want to do just for Brandon, because you said like it will be a bank. That's why I asked you for the definition of a bank, because I kind of think they already are. And I think Seyr is not that secretive about it. Even when I listened to the recent Natalie Brunell interview he did on his channel, I think it dropped like 2 days ago or so. And they talked about Stretch, and he continuously said what Stretch is. And he's like, people want a savings account or bank account. I cannot remember which word he used. I think he used a bank account or a savings account, one of those two words. And he said they want a bank account that gives them 11% and has zero vol. And I'm like, okay, but you're providing that bank account, that savings account, so you are a bank. So he cannot really say that we're not a bank anymore if he gives them a bank account that he calls himself a bank account that gives them almost no volatility with 11% yield on top of that. So I don't know, like I think Strategy kind of already is a bank or a central bank or small central bank or private central bank, like whatever you want to call it. It's kind of a bank.
NASDAQ listed bank, not NASDAQ listed central bank that issues its own products that people buy instead of currency, and they use those products to buy more Bitcoin. So I think they'll just continue to expand their product set to whatever they can use to speculatively attack the dollar and buy Bitcoin with. Does that mean they start opening up branches and we go to, the Strategy ATM, not just the common stock ATM, but like an actual automatic teller machine? I don't know if it leads all the way to what we traditionally know as a bank, but it has bank-like properties, as you said already, Robin, for sure.
Agreed. Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's I like that because it's the sly roundabout way. So that's what it is. I was thinking more in the technical definition of like just the legacy world of like when are people going to accept it, or like, oh yeah, we are a bank now. But yeah, no, you guys are spot on.
I was even thinking about they have all those engineers. They have an app, but they could literally make an app where you can have a bank account, where you can have like all those things. I don't think it makes sense for them right now. I don't know if it makes sense down the line, but it would be so easy, I think, for them to do such a thing if they want to do it. But at the same time, why would they do it? They don't have any incentive currently to do that, because we already have all our brokerage accounts where you can buy Stretch or like Stream in Europe and all of those things. So like they don't need to develop any of those things.
I think it helps them de-risk by just focusing on releasing these core products as well. And then like, they talked about pretty early on, like Stretch could be tokenized, right? But we're not going to be the ones that do it. But now there's these other businesses that are now tied into the well-being of MSTR. So if any regulatory kind of pressure comes at MSTR, it now doesn't just affect this centralized company that's monopolized all of this. It's actually affecting all of these other things.
The first thing that every Bitcoiner does, and the most important activity that every Bitcoiner keeps on doing, is buying Bitcoin. And I personally use Relay to buy and sometimes also spend or sell my Bitcoin. And there are two main reasons why I do so. The first one is it's Bitcoin only. They do not do any shit coins. They do not do any cryptos, any stocks, or anything else. This is a tool, an app that is fully focused only and solely on Bitcoin. The second one is self-custody. They give you the keys to your Bitcoin the moment you buy them. You never give them the control over your Bitcoin, and you don't have to trust them because you can verify that you and only you have the keys to your Bitcoin. There's no third-party risk. There's no freezing of your assets. There's no rug pulling. There's nothing of that. Download Relay, the app, on your phone, or go to relay.app on your browser and use code Robin to save fees and get cheaper Bitcoin. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called micro-seed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With micro-seed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today, and you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io.